Let's play a game. I'm going to tell you the story of Adam and Eve, and you're going to tell me which part is total made-up Bible fan fiction. Even if you're not religious, you've probably heard of this story, so please, feel free to play along. Here's how it goes. God created Adam, and then made Eve out of one of Adam's ribs. He let them loose in paradise, aka the Garden of Eden, and he literally only gave them one freaking rule. Do not eat the fruit from the tree of knowledge. But then, a talking snake appeared and convinced Eve to take a bite of the apple. And whomp, there it is, the so-called original sin. Eve eats the apple, disobeying God, and gets her and Adam kicked out of paradise, and now humanity has to wear clothes and have jobs and do taxes. It's kind of an important moment in terms of the history of the world from the biblical perspective. So, how did we get the details wrong? Hi, I'm Saphael. I have a master's degree in art history and nothing to do with my degree except make YouTube videos. Today, I'm talking about how the fruit of knowledge became an apple when it's never actually named in the Bible, and why an apple doesn't even make sense. Firstly, I want to acknowledge that there are multiple versions of this story. It's one of the narratives that tie the Abrahamic religions together. Islam, Judaism, and Christianity all share the story of the Garden of Eden. Today, I'm going to be talking about the Christian version as commonly taught, aka what they showed on The Simpsons. I'm not here to talk about whether or not this story is factual or fictional, or to prove or disprove anything. Personally, I do believe in evolution, but that's kind of besides the point. I'm approaching this from the perspective of an early medieval Christian, trying to figure out how and why the apple became so commonly accepted. I'm going to talk about art in a minute, but first, I'm going to talk about translations. There are a few different theories about how the word apple got introduced into Bible-adjacent writings, and how that might have caused people to start painting an apple whenever they were doing an Adam and Eve scene. We are going to get into semantics here, but I'll try to do my best to make it fun for you. The first theory starts with St. Jerome. I know, it's always about the saints with me. Jerome was a religious scholar who lived in the 4th century, and the Pope asked him to translate the Bible from Hebrew to Latin. At the time, Latin was the language pretty much everything was written in, and the Bible was originally written in Hebrew. It had been translated previously, of course, from Hebrew to Greek, and then from Greek to Latin. But that was a little bit too much like a game of telephone with things getting lost in the mix. So Jerome translated the Bible directly from Hebrew to Latin, cutting out the middleman. In the scene that takes place in the Garden of Eden, Jerome would have read the Hebrew word peri, which is a generic word for fruit, just like, well, the word fruit. He translated this to malus, which is a word that can mean apple, and can also mean evil. If you think about the context of the story, it makes sense as a double entendre. Taking a bite of the fruit was the original sin, the original act of evil, in a way, which introduced evil into the world. Jerome could have chosen the word malus to play into this. This theory about Jerome was the most prominent one for a while, but there are a few problems with it. First, at the time Jerome was working on his translation in the early Middle Ages, malus actually referred to multiple types of orchard fruits, like pears and pomegranates, not just apples. So Jerome was not necessarily making as much of a statement with his translation as previously suggested. A scholar from Rutgers University, Dr. Azan Yadin Israel, pointed out a few other things that mess with this theory. For one, the people who were reading Jerome's Latin Bible around the time it was published were writing about it. and in their writings, they referred to the fruit as pomum, or fructus. Other words that also mean fruit in a sort of generic sense. This would mean that they did not read Jerome's Bible and think, damn, that's an apple. They were still thinking about it just as a fruit. Our scholar theorizes that, instead, it actually might be the word pomum that's responsible here. When the Bible was translated into Old French, they may have used the word pomme, which at the time referred to orchard fruit more generally, but over time became pomme, which means apple. So basically, when it was written in Old French, they used a word that meant fruit. And over time, that word started to just mean apple, specifically. So, reading this translation a few hundred years later, the French people thought that the ye olden French people were calling it an apple, when in fact, at the time, they were just calling it a fruit. So how do we know it's the French that did it? Dr. Yadin Israel has visual evidence to back that up too. Before the 12th century, the fruit could be pretty much anything. There are examples of pomegranates, grapes, figs, and even something that might be an olive, all shown in different scenes of Adam and Eve. But then, after the 12th century, the apple is all over the place in French pictures of this scene. Then, other countries started picking up on the apple trend, like Germany in the Netherlands. Italy mostly depicted the fruit as a fig for a very long time, until pretty much every other country was doing the apple, at which point they threw in the towel and joined in. So the fruit became an apple, most likely because of how the meaning of words shifts over time. But let's take a step back. Does an apple even make sense? Evidence does suggest that apples were around in the Middle East when the Torah and then the Christian Bible were being written, so that's not the issue. The issue to me is that the Bible does not talk about an apple. But what does the Bible talk about? Figs. Even in the Garden of Eden, and when Adam and Eve got kicked out after eating the fruit of knowledge, it specifically says they used fig leaves to cover their nudity. That feels like an important context clue to me. Where else does the Bible mention figs? In Deuteronomy, it describes the promised land as a land of wheat and barley, of vines and fig trees and pomegranates, a land of olive oil and honey, a land where you will eat food without scarcity, in which you will not lack anything. Pomegranates and vines also get a mention here, but my point is about figs. And then if you look in the New Testament, you have fig parables out the wazoo. The cursing of the fig tree, the parable of the budding fig tree, the parable of the barren fig tree. Give me one good reason right now why the forbidden fruit would not be a fig. The fig also has, at times, represented female sexuality. If you choose to lean into this metaphor, Adam and Eve tasting sexuality led to them getting kicked out of paradise. But other fruits are also associated with different kinds of sin. Apples and grapes can both be used to make alcohol, which is associated with a number of sinning behaviors. Whether or not you believe in the Bible, whatever your opinions might be about its content, it's kind of an important book. So much of Western culture has been influenced by or even driven by Christianity. But this is not, and never has been, a one-way stream of influence. Many people view the Bible as a static text that came directly from God, fully formed. But we know that the books of the Bible were written over the course of hundreds of years by multiple different authors. And we know that the modern Bible isn't even the same for everyone. There are a dozen different translations in use, including the King James Version and the English Standard Version. I'm not saying that any one Bible is better than another. I'm just pointing out that the Bible itself also varies by culture. And then we come to this whole story about the apple that I've told you today. For a long time, It seems like what fruit you saw for the fruit of knowledge depended largely on where you lived. Over time, the apple became the number one fruit, and nowadays, it's not even a question. A lot of people don't realize that the Bible doesn't actually specify. Another point of conversation that's been coming up online lately is the idea of biblically accurate angels. The common image of angels in current pop culture is either beautiful adults or babies. However, recently people online have pointed out several verses that would suggest a different image. These kinds of texts have inspired the freaky images you might have seen online, but these images don't necessarily actually reflect the text. For example, the text suggests that the angels were not made of wheels, but they had wheels that hung out with them and followed them around, which may have served as their thrones. While these new images may not be exactly accurate to the text, they do open up the conversation about what angels look like and how these images have evolved historically. Older depictions at locations like the Hagia Sophia or the drawings of the Seraphim by Jean de Berry show angels as just a head with wings. Babies with wings didn't necessarily show up until later, and nowadays angels tend to be attractive human beings with white feathery wings. My point is that what an angel would look like has changed over the centuries, and it seems like it's still up for debate. Nothing is really static. So does it actually matter what fruit the fruit of the tree of knowledge is? I don't think so. But here's my point. Christianity comes up a lot these days when people are talking about legislation, politics, all of that kind of stuff. I would urge people to take a look at their faith and try to understand what parts of it come from a source text like the Bible, and what parts are distinct cultural add-ons, like the apple. And I would also urge people to think about the many authors who contributed to the writing and translation, and understand the tweaks and changes that have happened over the years before taking the text literally. Anyway, those are my fresh hot takes on some 2,000-year-old source material. Let me know what you thought. Please let me know what topics you'd like to see me cover in the future, and if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. I'm trying to do something here. And until next time, keep thinking.